Campi supervolcano only needed 60 years to prepare for this massive caldera eruption 39,000 years ago. Crazy new study, guys, because that would mean that it could happen way faster now that we could see an event at the Campi Flegrei supervolcano in Naples, in Italy. So there's a new study that reveals mind-blowing facts, and they keep sending us these studies. They're coming out and out and out. You have to watch my last video where they have now the first ever 3D image of the magma plumbing system underneath this massive area that spans the burning fields, Campi Flegrei, the Phlegrean fields, densely populated. Now they know where the magma is, and they scanned it up to a depth of 20 kilometers. But this new study is game changer, guys. Absolute game changer for the level of danger that currently is there from this supervolcano. Not in 100 years or 1,000 years, currently, because as it is so densely populated, and scientists have warned, prepare for it. You could see something right now, and this study is showing us this. So while the unrest at Campi Flegrei continues with earthquake swarm after earthquake swarm, the study reveals very worrying facts. The study proves the duration of previous magma uprising warming phases before an eruption. And it appears that the volcano is preparing for another eruption. That's why it is the subject of so many new studies just recently, but also over the last few years, because the symptoms that this supervolcano shows are actually quite clear. But many scientists give warnings, but many try to kind of say this is Brady seismic activity, like land rise and earthquake. It had always been like this, and the officials are downplaying it. We're closely monitoring it, don't worry. But all the scientists that are actually, or most of them, closely monitoring this thing, this monstrosity, they're saying something else. Of course, property values, tourism, over 6 million people in the direct affected area. What do you do with them? Of course, if they were smart, they should start moving everyone away from this. But, you know, should you empty out Italy because of that? Or the Campania region? Well, kind of, at least the red zone. That's what Giuseppe Mastrolorenzo, an INGV seasoned researcher and scientist, said. At least please evacuate 2 kilometers around Pozzuoli. So of course they're fearing that this densely populated region will be declared uninhabitable if they raise the alert level and if they have to bring everyone out or evacuate. But you know, at some point you have to face the truth, in my opinion, and it's better to prepare now. Maybe an eruption happens tomorrow, in a year, in 10 years, but you know, the more people you have permanently moved away from this area, the better, in my opinion. But it's hard. Should we just abandon the city of Vancouver in British Columbia, Canada? Because it's absolutely overdue for 2 big ones. There's a fault underneath Vancouver, and there's the Cascadia fault, the megathrust earthquake. I know it's a difficult situation, but think about this. The study confirms a span of 60 years. That's a very short span for the supervolcano to get ready. But we already have the current unrest that started in 2005 and is lasting for 20 years basically already. So is there only a time frame of 40 years left? Or do we count the unrest that we have seen in the 1980s to that time span? So could it be imminent? I think you guess what I'm hinting at. That's why it's so important that we really, really look at the specifics of this study, guys. The land is rising faster than it was last year, and during the last huge earthquake swarm, it had even accelerated to 3 centimeters per month. And this long-lasting phase of land rise and unrest is the longest one. There were previous phases, but they lasted maybe 2 years, and then the land was subsiding. That's not the case this time. German researchers at the University of Göttingen, they have now published a study, and they're focusing on that big eruption of Campi Flegrei that occurred 39,000 years ago. And what they were interested specifically in this study, they were asking, how long did it take the volcano, the preparation phase, the heating phase, and how long did it take until it erupted, from starting to waking up, unrest, until it erupted? And these results are very, very disturbing. So this eruption was called the Campanian Ignimbrite. And they were looking at rock samples that were produced during this eruption. The Ignimbrite is a volcanic rock that is there in this area. It's deposited several meters deep during this devastating eruption. In our modern society, we see earthquakes in Japan in 2011 with the devastation. We just saw one in Burma, but still yet for some reason we think, this is not going to happen, and this is not going to happen. And it is, and it eventually will. So Naples, the Naples area, like bordered from Vesuvius, which is bad enough, and the supervolcano Campi Flegrei with these many calderas, over 6 million people. So imagine this. It's a bustling city life with historic buildings dating back to the Roman Empire, millions of people going about their day and unaware that this giant beneath their feet could erupt at any second. Hopefully many more are aware right now. They always thought Vesuvius is the one they need to worry about. So just at the edge of Naples lies Campi Flegrei, and that has been restless now for decades. The ground is rising and it's accelerating in this land rise. Constant earthquakes are rattling the homes, destroying the homes, frightening the people. I've reported about this. If you're new here, check out my playlist. There's so much that you need to know. And many, many scientists are on the edge, and they're giving dire warnings. So all this unrest, if we look at the new study, could this be the prelude to a catastrophic eruption? Many scientists say, yeah, it could. Doesn't have to be. A groundbreaking new study has just pulled back the curtain on the most explosive events in this volcano's past. And the truth is chilling, guys. I can't describe it in any other way. Because when Campi Flegrei erupts, it can do this so fast you wouldn't imagine. Nobody thought. We want to look at the study, but also talk about what this means for the millions and millions of Italians and people living in the shadow of Campi Flegrei, and why the time might not be on their side, guys. This is the truth we have to face as well. So let's start with this eruption, this huge bang 39,000 years ago. Campi Flegrei unleashed the Campanian Ignimbrite eruption, a monster, guys, a monster of an event that has spewed out enough ash and lava to bury entire landscapes, and it did. So imagine like a plume of fire and smoke towering as high as 39 kilometers, 3,900 meters into the sky. And that is followed by rivers of molten rock and lava that was racing across the land there. And The INGV, the Italian Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology, has made a few videos outlining how fast this eruption would spread. So this wasn't just a regular eruption. This was one of the biggest eruptions in the world and one of the biggest in Europe's recent geological history. It has dumped between 181 and 265 cubic kilometers of material. That's enough to fill, guys, I always like to use that example, 70 million Olympic swimming pools. 70 million pools. And it has reshaped the region in a big way. It has left this massive caldera and it has sent ashes as far as Russia. And this is the kind of power that Campi holds. We have to make that clear. And this is why scientists are so obsessed to understand what makes this volcano tick, what drives this volcano. If you have seen my last video, it's not just one magma chamber. But let's fast forward to 2025 a little bit. There's a team of volcanologists that has dropped this bombshell in the journal that's called Bulletin of Volcanology. And it is a bombshell, guys. I can't name it in any other way. Their study digs into this companion ignimbrite eruption, not to marvel at its scale, which might have wiped out the Neanderthals, but to crack this critical question: how long did it take for the magma underneath Campi Flegrei to go from dormant to deadly? The answer is both, I have to say. Fascinating, of course, but also terrifying, because we're dealing with this again at the moment. Everything is locked inside tiny crystals that are called cyanidine. And they're found in the pumice, in these little rocks, volcanic rocks from that ancient eruption. And they tell a terrifying story, guys. Because these crystals are like time capsules. They're holding the clues to these frantic final moments before the volcano blew off its top 39,000 years ago. So these cyanidine, they're not just pretty rocks, they're geological detectives. They're already formed in magma chambers deep underneath the surface. And then when magma moves, is on the move, it mixes or it heats up, these crystals record these changes in their chemical makeup when the magma is coming. Think of them as diaries written in barium, like a trace element that shifts when new magma basically crashes the party. So what the scientists that conducted this study have actually done, they have zoomed in, they have looked at 79 cyanidine crystals, and they have specifically looked at the outermost edges of these crystals, where the final chapter of the eruption story is written, where it's stored. And those edges have showed sharp changes in barium, sharp changes. And that is proof that something dramatic happened right before the volcano erupted. And then, guys, stay with me, because here is where it gets really, really wild. The researchers have used a technique that is called barium diffusion chronometry. It's like rewinding a clock by measuring how barium has spread across those chemical boundaries in the crystals. And the speed of that spread depends on temperature. Now I guess you know where I'm hinting at. Temperature. If magma's rising up, it's changing the temperature rapidly. And the hotter it is, the faster this barium moves. So by crunching the numbers, the team has estimated how much time has passed between that moment when the magma got stirred up and the moment when it exploded onto the surface, when it erupted, actually came out as lava. So they tested 3 temperatures, 850 degrees Celsius, 902 degrees Celsius, and 970 degrees Celsius to cover all possibilities. But the middle one, the 902 degrees Celsius, that's their best guess for what was happening underground. And I'll explain to you what that means. Because really, guys, sit down, have a coffee or something stronger, and brace yourself for these results. So at a temperature of 902 degrees Celsius, most of those crystals that they looked at told a story of absolute chaos that unfolded in less than 60 years. And for this type of scale of eruption, only 60 years to prepare. This is frightening. And we might already, as I said, at least 20 years into this. You heard that right. 60 years or less, they're even saying, for a magma chamber underneath Campi Flegrei to hold enough juice to fuel a civilization-ending eruption, like to wake up and blow. And this is a study, guys, so don't write comments, this is fear-mongering, it's not going to happen. This is scientific proof, guys. And if it was hotter, let's say like 970 degrees Celsius, that time shrinks it to even as little as, now listen, 1 month. 1 month. So you might say from 902 degrees Celsius, where it takes 60 years, and then 970 degrees Celsius, it only takes a month. And we know things are heating up at Campi Flegrei right now. They're measuring this. And even, let's say at the colder end, when we're at 850 degrees Celsius, we're talking about only 8 years. And that's a bigger time frame, I know. 8 to 380 years. But this is still a blink in geological terms for a volcano like that. So this is the heart of this study's discovery. So that means a massive supervolcano like Campi Flegrei doesn't need centuries or millennia to go from quiet to catastrophic. Imagine you would get that news for Yellowstone. Whoo! So it can happen in a human lifetime, maybe even faster. That's the takeaway from this study. But let's pause a little bit and let that sink in, if that's even possible. Imagine you're living in Naples today, or in Pozzuoli, beautiful Italian landscape, drinking your espresso, having this beautiful Neapolitan pizza, while beneath you a magma chamber could be gearing up for eruption in the span of a single generation or less. And that's the kind of tension that this study brings to the table. It's not just about what happened 39,000 years ago. It's about what could happen in the very near future. And that makes Campi Flegrei not some distant threat. It's right there under one of the most densely populated regions on Earth. Yellowstone's not densely populated. And we need to understand why this is so alarming. So let's zoom out a little bit away from Campi Flegrei. This isn't a classic cone-shaped volcano like Vesuvius. It's a caldera. It's a sprawling depression that has formed through past eruptions that have been so massive that they have collapsed the ground above. It looks from the aerial view like bombs have hit the area, or asteroids or something like this. This Campi Flegrei supervolcano is really a restless beast and known for this bradyseism that they're all talking about right now. Like slow ground movements that signal that pressure is building up from below. The land underneath Campi Flegrei has been rising since the 1950s, sometimes by inches, sometimes by feet. We always see this in centimeters. In 2024 alone, the ground was creeping up about 2 centimeters a month. Thousands of tiny earthquakes and bigger ones were shaking the area. And scientists think that magma and hot fluids are moving at only shallow depth, between 3 and 5 kilometers, stirring up that trouble. I have reported about these studies where they discovered the magma. But here's the kicker, guys. This unrest doesn't necessarily mean that an eruption is coming, right? But in the 1980s, Campi Flegrei threw a fit with quakes and uplift that had everyone on edge. But thankfully, it has then quieted down without a peep, probably only caused a magma intrusion, not an eruption. But today, Campi Flegrei signs and voices are louder. More quakes, larger quakes, faster uplift, changes in volcanic gases. We just had the biggest ever recorded quake there, 4.6. For a volcano, that is a lot. But of course, no one can say for sure what's next. That's why this study is such a game changer, because it looks at past data, and that was such a problem before because it's such a long time ago. So it tells us that if the Campi Flegrei supervolcano decides to erupt, it might not give us much warning, and that's what other scientists are confirming as well. Local scientists that observe this thing every day, every second. So it could mean decades, years, months. That's all what we might get. But let's go back to the study and let's look a little bit deeper again into what these cyanidine crystals have revealed. The study found 2 types of magma in the Campanian ignimbrite eruption. So the early stuff was highly evolved, meaning it sat around for ages, like cooling and crystallizing into a thick, sticky mush. So its cyanidine crystals were mostly unzoned, like smoothed out by thousands of years of slow diffusion. But the later magma, that was less evolved, like fresher and packed with zoned crystals that were showing wild swings in chemistry. So those swings point to a dramatic event, like a surge of hot magma from deeper underground crushing into the sleepy reservoir, shaking things up like a volcanic alarm clock, really like boof. And really get that picture in your head that this magma chamber is a gigantic pot of stew that's like simmering quietly for millennia. And then suddenly someone dumps a bucket of boiling hot broth into that pot. Then the pot starts to bubble. The ingredients start to mix up, and before long it's overflowing. And that's what happened 39,000 years ago. The new magma that was intruding lowered the magma chamber's viscosity and boosted its volatile gases like water and CO2, and has turned a sluggish mush into an explosive cocktail. And scientists have confirmed just recently that the magma that is at shallow depth might be in an explosive state, or is in an explosive state already. And that's why their conclusion was there might not be much warning time. So the study's authors say that this mixing happened very, very fast. For a volcano, within 60 years or less. That is fast. And then, this happened before the whole thing blew sky high. We have to say sky high, 39 kilometers. So now you might be wondering, how does this compare to other volcanoes? What are they doing? The researchers have looked at that as well. And they have compared Campi Flegrei's big eruption to a smaller one from the same volcano called the Agnano Monte Spina that is about 4,500 years ago. That one was really tiny if you compare it to the companion ignimbrite. Less than a cubic kilometer of magma was spewed out. But guess what? And that's the interesting part. Its crystals showed similar timescales, just a few decades of mixing and then eruption. So they looked at other monster volcanoes as well, like Yellowstone and the Bishop Tuff in California. And same story, guys. Massive eruptions, but short lead times, sometimes just years or decades. So it's like nature's playing a cruel trick, like big or small, these volcanoes can turn deadly with barely a heads up. And it's not over yet, guys. This brings us to the scariest part. What does that mean for today? Campi Flegrei is clearly, without a doubt, awake. And it's not being subtle about it. We have to say that if we look at only the last 2 months with the 4.6 and this weeks-long lasting strong earthquake swarm. So that's why the scientists are watching it like hawks, staring at it with seismometers, GPS stations, gas sensors. They're trying to track every twitch. But the truth is, guys, they are still learning how to read the signals. And an eruption, even if it's as small as the Monte Nuovo eruption that formed this mountain Monte Nuovo in 1538, did not destroy Naples, thankfully, but was bad enough. But it could also be another companion ignimbrite, like a once in a millennium disaster that would blanket the region in ash, disrupt the global climate, and displace millions and end millions. So the study doesn't say, of course, that an eruption is imminent, but it screams one thing loud and clear, and it really screams that, guys, it's coming, and it could come fast. And let's talk numbers to drive this home, guys. Naples and its suburbs are home to over 3 million people, and Campi Flegrei itself has about 1.5 million people living inside or around on top of its caldera, and the whole area, we're talking about more than 6 million people. So an eruption like the companion ignimbrite would be like unthinkable. Like pyroclastic flows moving at hundreds of kilometers per hour. That's the speed. Ashfall, burying towns. The sky is dark. Infrastructure would collapse under the weight. Even a small eruption could close roads, shut down airports, overwhelm emergency services. And the earthquakes that would be the precursor would already bring so many buildings down and block evacuation routes. Of course, Italy has plans in place, evacuation drills, hazard maps. I've told you all about this, and scientists are heavily criticizing this, saying it's not working. But like 60 years or worse, only a few months. That isn't much time to prepare 6 million people for chaos. So why does this study hit us so hard? At least it hits me so hard. Let me know what you feel in the comments. But it's not just the science, right? What they found out about Campi Flegrei. It's also the urgency that it lays upon us. So the volcanologists used to think that big eruptions needed centuries to build up, giving us plenty of time, plenty of warning. But this research is completely flipping this idea on its head. It says that a magma chamber can sit quietly for thousands of years and then spring to life in the blink of an eye, geologically speaking. So for a place like Campi Flegrei, where every rumble feels basically like a countdown right now, that's a wake-up call that I think nobody can ignore. And let's zoom in on the human side again for a quick moment. I mean, imagine you're a scientist at the Vesuvius Observatory working for the INGV, and you're looking at that data. You're sitting in your office, it's late at night, and you're looking at that. So every spike in seismic activity, every centimeter of ground uplift should make your heart race. And many scientists from the INGV are saying that. Some against the will or the official version that the INGV gives out. So you're sitting there and you know that Campi-Flegrei is capable of, that big, dangerous thing. You've seen the scars of its past in the rocks. And this study is basically your flashlight in the dark. It shows you that the volcano doesn't play by slow rules. Doesn't that remind you as a scientist that every day counts, that every signal matters because the clock could be ticking faster than anyone thought? And now look at my past videos, at all the warnings that these INGV scientists are giving and have been given for years and feel like they have been ignored. I think knowledge is power, and this study gives people a sharper lens to watch Campi-Flegrei. It's not all doom and gloom. By understanding how fast Campi-Flegrei can move to catastrophe, they should be able to fine-tune their monitoring, improve their models, and maybe, just maybe, catch it before it catches all of us by surprise. The scientists are already doing incredible work, like combining the satellite data, drilling projects, chemical analysis to peer at the volcano's heart. But I think the more they learn, the better they can prepare. Whatever that means, like for the earthquakes, strengthening the buildings, planning evacuations, educating communities, moving people away slowly in the long term. Where do we go from here with the current unrest phase at Campi-Flegrei? Well, for starters, we have to keep watching it very closely. The unrest at Campi-Flegrei could fizzle out like it did in the 1980s. Hopefully it will. But it could also turn into something bigger, and it shows no sign that it's fizzling out at the moment. It shows the opposite. So this study doesn't predict the future, but it lights a fire under us to stay vigilant, in my opinion. It's a call to action for local governments, for scientists, and for the citizens as well to take this volcano seriously. Because if 60 years it's all it takes, and it's already been rumbling for 20, if that's all it takes for a magma chamber to go from calm to catastrophic, then every moment we spent preparing is a moment well spent, in my opinion. That is the message for me that I take away from this study. Let's wrap this up with a little bit of a challenge. Campi-Flegrei isn't just a volcano. It's also a test how we are facing nature's raw power. Are we ignoring it and saying, oh, everything is good for commercial reasons, not to create panic? Well, this study for sure shows us the stakes. Like a sleeping monster that can wake up in our human lifetime. In the lifetime of the people that live there. Maybe even in just a few months. So the next time we hear about an earthquake in the Naples area or see Campi-Flegrei in the news, which is not too often, they don't report about it that much. But whenever you hear about Campi-Flegrei again, think about these cyanidine crystals and their 60-year secret. They're telling us time might be short and we better be ready. So thanks for joining me, guys, on this journey through the history of Campi-Flegrei, unraveling the threat that is currently coming from it for us. And if you like that, please click the like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments, what do you think about living on top of a volcano or near a volcano like this? Should we be way more worried, or is this just nature doing its thing? I hope I'll catch you in the next video where we definitely will keep exploring the wild world of volcanoes and earthquakes and the secrets that they hold. And stay curious, guys. Watch the videos here in the end screen. It's mind-blowing what I found out. And you should really watch this other Campi Flegrei video, because that's also a new study that shows us where the magma is, which is also alarming, equally alarming. So now we know that it's only might take a very short period for that magma. But now we know where it is. It's the first ever 3D model. So click the link in the end screen. And if you want to support my channel, it's greatly appreciated. Check the links in the description of this video. Become a supporting member. Buy me coffees. And leave a comment, a like, and a share it, and a subscription. And I see you soon, guys. Thanks for that. Bye.